Well, it feels like a hot minute since I sat down to record one of these videos. Hello viewers, welcome back to Media 13. My name is Jordan and you're watching this month's episode of Last Month I Watched, everyone's favourite Letterboxd logged show. Now for all the newcomers that are not aware, this is the show where I sit down once a month at the start of every month and I talk about what I watched the month before. For those of you hearing that description, I bet the title's starting to make a whole lot of sense. But we've got considerably more to get through than last month, so I'm just going to jump straight into this. On the 1st of April, we started off with 3 movies, which was a pretty big change considering the month beforehand we probably only watched 9 total. To start off with, I watched The Adam Project, Netflix's latest movie directed by Sean Levy and starring Ryan Reynolds. I thought it was fine, I enjoyed it for what it was and I gave it 3.5 stars. Also on that day, I watched Fresh, which was a Disney Plus streaming movie starring Sebastian Stan. Now, I was on record saying this is probably Sebastian Stan's best performance that I've seen so far from him, and I still stand by that. I thought this movie was really great, it had some great tense moments, and I gave this one a 4 stars. To finish off that night, I also watched Cruella, the 2021 movie starring Emma Stone. I already knew I loved this movie, so going into it, I was not worried in the slightest, and by the end of it, I'd given it 4 stars. On to the 2nd of April, I watched the Cheaper by the Dozen reboot, and it wasn't awful. It was far from good, don't get me wrong, I'm probably never going to sit down to watch it again, but based on the fact that there were a few jokes that my skewered sense of humour found funny, I gave it a 2.5 stars. There's just something about a child being called a disappointment to the family that always gets me. Maybe it's the relatability behind it. Moving on to the 5th of April, I went for my first cinema viewing of the month, and it was a back-to-back, baby. We started off with the cinema, the movie of the year, Morbius. For those of you unaware, that was dead sarcasm. Now, I'm not going to say anything on this movie because in the near future, i.e. the next week ideally, there is going to be a Morbius video. Surprise. Again, it's a month late, but the Batman video was a month late, and look how that did. The second film that I saw at the cinema that day was Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and my god did I love this movie. I thought it was absolutely amazing. I'm still working on a Sonic 2 video, so again, I'm not going to say much, but I did give this one a 4.5 stars. Skipping ahead quite a few days, on the 10th I watched The Bubble, so we were on a track record of watching some 2022 movies and getting those out the way. The Bubble was fine for what it was again. I think as a Netflix comedy movie, it wasn't awful. I gave it a 3 stars, of course it had Daisy Ridley in it, which is probably why there was 3 stars instead of 0. But who's going to judge? This is my rating system, I choose. On the 11th, I watched Pixels. I have seen this movie 3 times more than I should have, and for reference, I have seen this movie around 3 times. I gave it a 2 star. Being serious, it's not awful. It's probably one of the better bad Adam Sandler movies. It just isn't really all that funny, and it's a comedy movie. On the 13th, I watched Spider-Man No Way Home again, and I gave it 5 stars, because why wouldn't I? This movie is never not going to be a 5 stars for me. I'm putting that in video form now. Moving on to the 15th, this is where the start of my MCU rewatch came through, because obviously we are doing Doctor Strange this month as of you watching this. I'm seeing it in 4 days and I'm super fucking excited. So on the 15th, I watched Iron Man, which, you know, I like this movie and I'm going to keep each one of these to a minimum because I have something that I'm working on. And I'm saying nothing about it. I'm disclosing nothing other than it's an MCU project because I don't want to lose any motivation for it. I do genuinely still really love this movie and I gave it a 3.5 stars. Also on the 15th I watched The Incredible Hulk, which is that one MCU movie that isn't really an MCU movie but they've started to sort of make it an MCU movie again. Whatever, it's boring, it's not the worst, I gave it 2.5. On to the 16th I watched Iron Man 2, which on the same level as The Incredible Hulk I gave 2.5 stars because while it's a lot more fun than The Incredible Hulk, I think the story's just as vapid. I think there's certain choices in the movie that it just falls flat, and I'm not the biggest fan of it, honestly. On the 16th as well, apparently, I did watch Spider-Man No Way Home again. 5 stars, obviously, clearly. On the 17th, I watched Thor, and Thor is a movie that I've had a complete 180 on. I mean, go back a few years and I was slating Thor, I was calling it pretty bad. Now, the first Thor might be my favourite of the Thor movies. In fact, I can't say whether it is or not because you're about to find out in the next 2 minutes. I gave that a 3.5. Missed out the 18th and on the 19th I watched Captain America the First Avenger. But anyway, I gave Captain America the First Avenger a 3 stars. I don't think it's bad, it's just not one of those MCU movies that I like going back to unless I'm doing the rewatch. On the 21st we capped off Phase 1 with Avengers Assemble or The Avengers depending on where you're from. And people, I still love this movie. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I think it is probably still up there. Do I want to call it the best Avengers movie? I think in certain ways yes, but in terms of the movie as a whole, no. I promise that makes more sense in my head. Yeah, Avengers, 4.5 stars. The next day I watched Iron Man 3, and Iron Man 3 has become my first 5-star rating of this MCU rewatch, because we're not counting Spider-Man No Way Home because we've not got to that part in the timeline yet. Iron Man 3 is a movie that I adore with my whole heart. I wish that the MCU could go back to treating characters like this, because the level of depth that goes into Tony's arc in this movie is like next to nothing that we've really seen in the MCU. I think the only film that really gets close is, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy with a few of their characters like Rocket or Peter. And yeah, Iron Man 3 is just a solid 5-star movie in my opinion. I think it's honestly brilliant and very underrated. On the 23rd I watched Thor The Dark World, which took home the lowest MCU rating with 2 stars. I do not like this movie much, I do not wish to say more at this time. On the 24th, I watched Captain America The Winter Soldier, that film that is touted by many to be the MCU's greatest, and I gave it a 3.5 stars. I'm not huge on this one. Also on the 24th, I watched the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a solid 4-star movie. I feel like anytime I've given it above a 4-star, it always ends up creeping back down because I just can't, justify putting it up there with the other 4.5 stars that I have. But I'm pretty much at the stage where I am just accepting that it's a solid 8 out of 10 movie. On the 25th, Avengers Age of Ultron, and in my humble opinion, this gets far too much hate. I'm going to quickly disclaim here because I know Twitter's going to need to hear this so they don't come for my head, although they'll probably try anyway. I know Joss Whedon is a complete piece of shit, but my god, could he write characters. You know, I look at the interactions that they have in the Russo brother movies, and I wish that we could have someone with the writing talent that Joss Whedon had when it came to character interaction come in and really overhaul, just dialogue in the MCU in general. Because where it feels so stilted now, in Age of Ultron and even Avengers Assemble, it feels so fluid, it feels so natural. Everyone speaks as they should. It's a shame because for one of these characters it's really the last time that we see him speak as they should. But anyway, I gave it a 4-star and I'll speak on it more soon. On the 26th I watched Ant-Man, which I gave a 3.5 stars, and this is one that I really can't talk about much because this has a decent sized proportion in this next video that I'm working on. The 26th saw Captain America Civil War take home a 5-star. Rounding off the 26th I watched Doctor Strange, which is a movie that I still do genuinely love, even if I think it's going to get thrown into the ground by the sequel coming out next week. I've given Doctor Strange a 4-star, and I think that's a pretty solid rating for it. I wouldn't go below it, I don't think it deserves anything above it. The 27th, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Now I remember when this film first came out, I wasn't huge on it. I think it started off as a 7 out of 10 on my Letterboxd rankings when I first watched it. But since then, every time I sit back down to see it again, it just gets better and better and better. And because of that reason, I did decide a few watches ago that it was just a solid 5-star movie. And there's a lot of people that have argued with me that if I have given a film below 5-star before, I can't change it to a 5-star, to which I then say, I missed the part where that's my problem. I can rank films however the fuck I want. Don't tell me what to do. On the 28th, I took my second and final cinema trip of the month, and I went to go and see The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent starring Nick Cage, which I will say nothing on and not even a rating, because of the fact that there is also a video dropping immediately, probably soon after the Morbius video comes out, if not just before. On the 29th, I watched Spider-Man Homecoming, which again, I can't say much on because it's the MCU video. But I do really enjoy this one. It did drop. I used to have this as a 5-star movie. It's now a 4.5. But the drop by half a star does not mean that I love this movie any less. On the 30th, I also watched Thor Ragnarok. And I understand that this is a fan favourite MCU movie. I'm never going to get behind it. I'm sorry. Listen, I accept that it's probably a good movie. But the issue with it is that it's a very comedy heavy movie. And comedy is a very subjective genre, which means that it's either a hit or it's a miss. And for me, the majority of the time, Thor Ragnarok is a complete miss. I think regardless of how you want to explain Thor's rapid character change into this bumbling idiot, it happens far too quick and it happens off screen. I did actually have someone telling me that of this sort of theory that the movie is Thor's retelling of events in a happier tone to put the people of Asgard at peace. And while I do appreciate that, it still doesn't make me like the movie anymore. Anyway, I gave it a 3 stars, which means yes, Thor 1 is my favourite Thor movie. And then finally, on the 30th of April, I then watched Black Panther. How do I put this lightly? It's not that great a movie. I will continue to argue the point that Black Panther was better as a character in Civil War than he is in his own movie. It's reasons that I will go into a lot more later on down the line, but the movie fails to grasp me in any way. Like, don't get me wrong, T'Challa is a very likable character. It's nothing really against him more than the fact that he just gets outshined by everyone else in the film. Such an interesting and complex character in Civil War, but then in Black Panther, he just falls flat, and I'm not sure whether to pin that on the fact that he's back in Wakanda, where everything is more his level rather than him seeming a step ahead of everyone else. But it just doesn't really do it for me. I mean, I gave it a 3 star. It's not an awful movie. It's on the cusp of being, very like average for me. But anyway, that looks like that's just about everything that I watched last month. So with that being said, what was your favourite first watch of last month, and what is your biggest shock going into this looking at my ratings? What's the one that you didn't expect the most? I'm sorry if I seem a little all over the place because I've not done this for like a month now. But that being said, if you did enjoy this video, feel free to leave a like. It lets me know I'm doing something right with the content, and it lets me know you want more episodes of Last Month I Watched. You can also subscribe so you don't miss out on next month's episode, as well as the other content that's coming your way very, very soon. That's all from me. My name has been Jordan. I hope you're all in a fantastic day, and I will see you all in the next one.